Hello, today we will be discussing IFS therapy for addictions, section 4, treatment, from the section called Exile Interventions till the end of the book. And let's take a moment and raise your hand when you'd like to contribute or ask a question, or if you have an aha moment. So I'll flick through the book. And I'm okay to start here first. About Exile Interventions here in this book, Cece Sykes, she talks about exile jailbreak. And that happens here, what she says, whenever clients focus internally, they can get flooded with the warded off memories and feelings of exiles. And this is called exile jailbreak. In response, firefighters will activate instantly. They may distract or may start hunting for some way of soothing. I want chocolate. And managers will get anxious and start to criticize. And Dixon says, our job is to be the eye of the storm. And I love that, to be the eye of the storm. Now, I do have a question around this, and I'm quite curious about your experience. Before learning about IFS, and a few years back, I personally found it difficult to have quiet time. And like, I could see people like going jogging by themselves. And I'm like, how do they cope with their thoughts? What do they do with their thoughts? After practicing IFS, I don't really experience that. Not to that extent at all. So I think now my kind of understanding is perhaps, when you do have some quiet time, for some people, exiles, they can flood us. I don't know, has anyone heard of anything like that? Have you noticed the exile jailbreak at all in yourselves or your clients? Or what is your thought? What are your thoughts around that? Yes, Paul?
Yeah, I think that certainly the people I work with addictions, that's what's happening a lot of the time, is people are moving into firefighter behavior because of overwhelm. I think what you were just saying then about before IFS and the eye of the storm and all that, I've always said I come to IFS from a spiritual angle because I've instinctively, since a teenager, been meditating or whatever, praying, having peace. It's just been something. I mean, I'm a Christian. I was when I was a teenager, I became a Christian, and that's having space available in the midst of whatever life was doing throughout my life. And I've been in a monastery for 2 years, so I learned prayer there, and then I'm now part of a religious order that has prayer and contemplation at the center. So it's always been that. So IFS didn't introduce me to calm and peace and being in self, but it gave me more of a clear or more of a skeleton, if you like, to put everything else on. It gave a better map. That's the word. Well, not a better map, a map anyway, because there are other maps when I think about it, actually, because yeah, it's a useful map. But it's not new. It didn't introduce something new to me. It's same as addiction. When I work with people with 12-step, that's the same thing. That's another map that also has prayer and meditation as part of that. So these are different maps for helping people when we're talking specifically about addiction and firefighters and ways of managing or working with firefighters. And I still have a question around this book. And she does mention, you know, maybe IFS isn't the whole, you know, people need to still go into rehab and whatever that's going to look like to manage extreme firefighters. So, but yeah, but in terms of the eye of the storm, I like what he says there. The eye of the storm is one way of looking at it, but that's just saying finding peace, I think, or making peace, or I think you have to work at that. That's my throughout life, is putting the discipline in to be able to put time aside to be quiet.
Yeah. But when you're quiet, are you saying that you can meditate? And some people have got a map, they can relate and connect to their parts or something like, you know, befriend their parts?
I mean, that's where for me, I mean, everybody's different. For me, when I'm in my quiet time, I can maybe pick up any book. I mean, I have lots of spiritual books about lives of saints or spiritual approaches and how to pray or contemplation, or so I'll be reading a book, and then I'll go into quiet. So I'll start reading the book and then it'll take me into a quiet space. IFS can do that as well, because I'll come at it from the IFS angle, and that might mean me taking time. It happened yesterday to get in touch with a part of me that I've been in touch with before, because I think I was reading this, I think, and it's towards the end of the book when she talks about revisiting parts that you've forgotten about that you've already visited. So doing that takes me also, I need to be in a quiet place to be able to do that.
Okay.
So it's a different way of getting into a quiet place to be present. So
so that's brilliant.
I think one is to be present to the, if you like, the higher power. The other one is being present to me. So there's that. So,
this is so interesting, because, like, you know, for example, I have clients, and when they, you know, when they go to work and they're busy, and that's brilliant, and then when they stay at home at night quiet, then that's the difficulty. It gets challenging, because I think of this pain, this exile, jailbreak, when you're alone with your thoughts. And I'm getting, you know, one more thing, what I'm saying is, what I'm getting is, you're saying that, you know, with prayer and spirituality, that helps you calm down your system and connect better with you, be in the present moment.
Yes, but it depends. I have a client who she has real issues around being silent, because her father used to punish her with silence. Go in the corner, sit quietly, and be really aggressive. So when she goes to silence, she has all the flooding of her father, who's dead now, but she's got all that inner critic voice of whatever. So I've been working, she's actually taken to IFS really well, and it's helping her to calm down. But still, it's about, for me and her, to manage how she can access sight. She's just been doing a course with Tyra Brack on RAIN, that technique, if anybody knows that, the acceptance. And she became overwhelmed. So it's learning to manage the overwhelm in the silence. And I talked to her about window of tolerance and all them sort of things. And of course, IFS, and to get in touch with the part that's the father, and how to maybe unburden around that. So, so it's not always straightforward, but at the same time, for other people, it needs, I think, or my experience is, you need to practice discipline of, I don't know, a quarter an hour, half an hour, 20 minutes a day, putting that time aside for the quiet. Otherwise, and I do the same, and even now, you know, I can forget, and if a week can go by and I've not had enough quiet time, I've just let the daily take over, and then I become overwhelmed. So quiet recharges my batteries. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Anne? It occurred to me that what IFS offers is this externalization with a lot of characterization and personification of our insights. And I was wondering, what occurred to me was that maybe you hear about some people who are much better at loving other people and not very loving to themselves. You know, people, you know, sometimes you hear, oh, you can only love others when you love yourself. But I think to some extent, a lot of us are much more compassionate to others. And I wonder if those people who have that discrepancy between compassionate to others and not compassionate to themselves, the fact that IFS uses this personification techniques helps those people extra because it kind of, takes advantage of their ability to feel compassion for a being outside themselves. And then you're kind of in IFS, that's like, well, these beings, we're trying to see them, like look at them a bit, the way you would look at other people outside yourself that you do naturally feel compassion to, and you can do that to yourself. Because I do have known lots of people who have problems feeling self-compassion, and they just don't know how to feel it. It's weird to them. And so, but they have no problem feeling compassion to other people. So maybe IFS kind of combines those systems in that way.
Yes, and I think even in this book, she mentions that there are some people that they find it easy to be compassionate towards others, but not themselves. And I'm showing here this therapist handout, and she says, Cece Sykes says, identify a vulnerable part, guide a connection to the self via imagery or activation. So imagery, like thinking of their part as, like, as you said, an personification. And activation. And that really a little bit confused me. I didn't see this kind of distinction before. But it kind of makes sense a little bit to me. Because like further on, she says about think of a time when this part was activated, like, when your addiction, you were doing your addiction. How did you look like? What did you feel like? So you have an image, that's the imagery. There's an image of yourself doing the behavior or feeling or whatever, yeah? And then the activation, I'm guessing, is going inside the body and noticing what's happening. I quite like this distinction. I guess, Anne, if you see, a part of you as outside of you, it's easier to connect with it.
Yeah, it naturally creates that distance. And I think also naturally creates a curiosity that we don't necessarily feel for ourselves when things are invisible. But if there's this invitation to add all this imagination and like sensory richness to it, we're automatically inviting new explorations into this moment.
Yeah. Great. Cece Sykes here, she, in this therapist handout, creating safe connections with exiles. She again makes another distinction: a one-way connection and a two-way connection. And I'm just highlighting that, again, Cece Sykes, she brings in a lot of insights and makes a lot of distinctions. Like I just mentioned, a connection to the self can happen via imagery or activation. She's an expert to see, she sees all those fine details and labels them in a way. So with this one, creating safe connections with exiles, a one-way connection, she says, the one-way connection, which includes a first-hand experience of warmth, acceptance, and connection, introduces the exile to the self and demonstrates that no strings are attached. For many exiles, this experience is novel. Some are immediately relieved, while others are skeptical. They see that the self is different from protective parts, and they're controlling or distracting agendas. The self offers kind attention, the opportunity to belong, and the promise of ongoing support. Every self-to-part connection increases stability within the system. This is what IFS is. is a self-to-part connection. This is the definition of IFS. And exiles, that's the one-way connection when the exile meets self. Some of them accept that support, but some other exiles are skeptical, and we may have to go back again and again to prove to the exile that self will not abandon it. And then, you know, just to, a two-way connection is different a little bit. So what does that mean? A two-way connection between the self and exile is free-flowing and trusting. The exile shares important stories and is in turn nurtured by the self's validation and acceptance. So the two-way connection goes a little bit further. In order to unburden, the exile may just need to share painful experiences and feel validated. But if it's stuck in the past, it will need the self to come back to that time to do what it needed someone to do for it then. And I love this here, you know, with each interaction, the self earns more trust and license to lead. Yes. Now, I do have a question here. And my connection, I'm going to go back to, I'm going to go back to a vignette. There are quite a few vignettes, but in her vignettes, there is some blending. But I have noticed with some clients, they can be an exile takeover. And it's really like here, for example, with the vignette with Irina. And I'm going to read a little bit of the beginning. The therapist says, "Are you there? Hi, Irina. I see that the panicked part has taken over. I'm going to talk with it directly. Are you there?" Irina nods. "Would you like help?" Irina nods. "Great. You're welcome here. We want to help you. Here's what you can do to make sure we can help you. Are you listening?" Irina nods. "Great. Give Irina a little space. If you let them in, even just a little, they can help you." The therapist uses explicit direct access to connect with the panicked exile, Irina. They shift and begin to look calmer. "Okay." Therapist, "How's that?" Irina, "Better." And therapist, "How do you feel toward this panicked partner?" And Irina, "I'm glad I can breathe now." So it's not always that easy, because I have noticed sometimes exiles can take over the system, and no matter what you say, it feels like, you know, because all parts are welcome. So when somebody, it's happened to me quite a lot of times, when there's sadness and panicky feelings taking over the system. And no amount of persuasion is going to make that pain to give a little bit of space. In Irina's case, there was a little bit of space.
Who is the them in this excerpt? It says,
I think there's a panicked part, and
the panic part is the exile, right?
okay, young exiles. There's quite a few exiles. Irina said she came to therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder and chronic restrictive eating patterns. In past sessions, most of their protectors would agree to unblend, but then a dissociative part would promptly blend whenever they approached young exiles. This left Irina unable to focus or respond to questions. in this dissociative
I believe
part,
she's referring to protective parts.
protective. Okay.
It's them.
But it says if you let them in even just a little, they can help you. So is the therapist saying to Irina that her protective parts, meaning they, can help Irina? It's
I
at the
believe so.
bottom of
At
the
first,
list.
I thought it was self, but when she's saying them, that doesn't make sense. So then then the next line says, Irina, they shift and begin to look calmer. So that makes me think it's parts begin to look calmer. And yeah, I'm not quite.
Yeah, it's a little confusing. The therapist is saying, let the parts in and the parts can help.
Yeah. It might be because also she's like gender neutral.
Oh, maybe
Yeah.
they is Irina. Okay, yeah.
Oh, yes, that makes
exactly.
sense.
Yes.
And you know what? When you brought up Exile Jailbreak, I thought you were referring to the next book. And look at that. The next book, that line is in there, Jailbreak.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God. Yes. And you know, going back to the Exile Jailbreak, I loved what Paul said, that you know, some people were punished by, you know, like the notice step. Wow, how damaging might be for the kids. You know, here's your punishment, go and sit on the notice step. They might associate quiet, I don't know, it does depend. But potentially, it depends how parents use it. I don't know. The quiet step, they're associated with pain and being rejected by family. And then when they are alone, or the notice step, whatever it's called, yeah? And when somebody grows up, then they associate time on their own with potentially, you know, with a notice step. So that was Paul's, one of the clients, Paul's client. That's my understanding. But yeah.
I agree with you, Vana, of your previous point that this story seems a little bit easy compared to how I think someone, a panicked exile. This seems like usually not so easy for a panicked exile to calm down with such a simple.
Yes, it's, oh my God, like, oh, sadness, oh my God, deep grief.
Yeah.
The key is that the therapist is embodied with self-energy, and parts recognize that.
Yeah. And the therapist can hold space. So because every part is welcome. Even if somebody's freaking out in front of you. That's my understanding. If the therapist gets triggered, now, I have shared a tear or two with a few clients. So, but I wasn't overwhelmed by it. That's my kind of confession.
I think shedding a tear is really nice too, especially if you with the self energy. So you're meeting them like we talked about before.
You know, yeah. So it could be like, but it is also, you know, I could have self energy, and then a part of my exile or whatever that is feeling the emotions. My empathy part is feeling some of that emotions.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that's can be extra healing, right? Because then the client feels they feel empathized with. Yeah.
And you know, like sometimes clients have got non-verbal parts. How would they communicate? Say even if they have a self-to-part relationship, the client self may need to feel the pain from the exile. Especially if there are non-verbal parts. There might be another way. You might, you know, invite an interpreter or something, an assistant, a guide to interpret what the non-verbal part is feeling. But yeah, I think I really believe in unblending, and it can be a challenging concept. Unblending is incredible, amazing. But getting there is not always just unblend. It's not like, it's not that straightforward always. Yes, Anne?
Going back to what you just said, do you think sometimes unblending helps more if the therapist is empathizing? Because then I can imagine the client could feel less alone. And then because it's like, oh, you've come to my emotional space with me and with the self energy. So that could even help unblending if the therapist lets their parts feel.
Yeah. If the therapist feels the pain of or some of the pain of the client.
Yes. And with the self energy, almost like modeling, because you can imagine the client could think, well, without the empathy, the therapist has a lot of self energy. Fine. You know, I guess I've had times where if I'm really upset and someone is just compassionate, but they haven't indicated feeling the empathy as much, then I sometimes I can sort of think or feel, well, it's easy for you to be compassionate because you're not feeling that. But then if they indicate that they feel it, like their parts are empathizing with, you know, whatever I was suffering with, and they're bringing compassion at the same time, I feel like that's more powerful. And because of that feeling not less alone from their empathy, from the empathy from their parts, then I feel more unblended.
Yes. Okay, here, what you just said, like, you know, if I do speak to somebody and they don't show they don't show attention, full attention, focus, they're on my side. Yeah, even if I'm wrong, I want my family to be on my side. Yeah. Responsiveness.
Yeah.
Then I don't I can't connect even with family. So I guess with the therapist, they need to, it does depend. And I agree with you. Sometimes I guess it is helpful to have a little bit of emotion. Yeah. So it does depend what is the meaning of compassion. What does it mean, compassion? Does it mean to be like curious? But you also have to show some warmth in your tone of voice and pace. It's not like everyday talking, is it? It's different into when you go in therapy.
Yeah, I think in the previous book when we talked about empathy versus compassion and that monk's fMRI study where they were very distinct things, and the monk was prompted to do extreme compassion only or extreme empathy only, and the example was to show how extreme empathy only without compassion, then the therapist can get overblended. But I think maybe the skill is if you can do both, then that's like extra powerful. Kind of when we talked about Jacob Hamm, the therapist at Mount Sinai, the head of psychology at Mount Sinai, how he'll go straight into the client's experience. You know, he talks about when he first hears about the rape of his client, he'll throw up, you know, because it's so horrific. And and with self energy, he does IFS as well, but also with his parts fully feeling the weights of what they've experienced. That's kind of how he does it. So it's just quite an extreme, you know, extreme parts empathy from a therapist example. But
yes. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yes, I agree with what you're saying. And another way of helping the unblending process. Okay, I'm going to read some of the text here in this section 4. But before I go there, I'm going to read the messages. Gray says, nonverbal parts can show images too. And that's amazing. And Marie says, relatability. Yeah. And I will move on to the book. And the book says, here in this vignette with Margot, I'm going to read a little bit because this is really interesting how the unblending happens. It's very interesting. It says here, unburdening an exile. Therapist, Margot, can you see or sense the 4-year-old now? Margot, yes, I see her. I feel panicky and sick. Therapist, okay, she's a little blended. Is it too much, or can you just let her know you're aware of her and we're here to help? Margot, oh, okay, yeah. Let her know we're here, but I feel the panic. Therapist, right, Margot. Such a scary, awful place for this little one. You're feeling her feelings. Margot, yes, she's scared shitless. She feels sick, and I do too. The exile is blending and beginning to overwhelm Margot. Therapist, of course, let's take a breath together. They take breathing pause. Let her know that you feel her feelings and you're still here. You're just telling me about her. The therapist pauses to facilitate enough unblending to continue safely. So there's a little bit of a trigger warning here because she was, trigger warning, Margot was molested when she was 4 years old. And she cannot unblend. But what made her blend? What helped her? And I've started using this. I realized how important that is. Knowing a little bit about polyvagal theory, hypnosis, meditation, they use breathing a lot to change the state. And in IFS here, Sykes, she says, okay, you can't unblend. What's the easiest thing to do? Let's take a breath. Deep breathing definitely helps you unblend. Calms down, changes the state, calms down the system. So she pauses to take a few breaths. And then Margot, yeah, okay, I'm here, we're here. Wow, is she panicking? Therapist, how are you feeling toward her as she panics? Are you with her, or is the panic overwhelming? Okay. And then she moves on, and the 4-year-old wants to leave the past where the abuse happened and come to the present. And she can be here with us, or she can be with us here or anywhere that feels safe. And then I love that as well. Another cool way to connect with an exile. The therapist says, let's pause and send her your energy and breath. Let her get used to being with you now. Now, because that little one, as I said, the little 4-year-old was abused, molested. Therapist asks Margot how she feels towards the girl, the little one. And Margot said, sad. He was terrible. The person who molested her was actually her father. And the therapist says, share that with her, Margot. Help her take in that you get it. Your heart is open to her. You know how hard it was for her to be captured by him. But what I love about this vignette is that Sykes noticed that there's another part. Margot cares, wants to connect with the 4-year-old, but also a sad part just jumped in. And she tells you everything like, okay, she asks the 4-year-old if the 4-year-old needs to show or tell you anything about that time. Here and so here's okay. I think possibly here I got a little bit mixed up. Here I think I got a bit mixed up, but Sykes can really map. You know, she's an expert at mapping parts, at seeing parts. So I'll read a little bit to give a little bit more context. Okay, Margot explains that she got hurt by her father, and the therapist encourages her to share her story. And that happened quite often. Says there's a lot of stuff. The little girl, hated him. And therapist says, what? Okay, of course she hated him. What does she need from you right now? And Margot says, just to show me. Okay, the therapist says, can you stay with her? When she's ready, ask what that was like for her. Margot, it was like his sickness got into her. She slightly curls over. I've always felt it in my gut. Therapist, let her know you feel it too. Would she like you to come to that time and do for her now what she needed someone to do then? Margot, she wants me to tell him that he can never ever touch her again. He's blah, blah, blah. He's swearing. He can rot in hell. I'm sure that's where he is. Therapist, here's an angry part. So the 4-year-old says he's angry, and the therapist picks up quickly. Here's the angry part. Yeah, this part could rip him to shreds. Of course she could. Therapist pauses. Does that part object to you helping the little one? And asks the angry part for permission to help the little one. No, they both want my help. I'm putting him out of the house. He's never getting his hands on her again. Yeah, he won't say it, but he's sorry. He knows something is wrong with him. He killed himself, so that. How's the little one doing? She's glad I got rid of him, but she's back there again, curled up on the floor. The exile has gone back to the past again. Is his sickness still in her? It doesn't belong to her. If she doesn't want it, she can send it out. And then she checks with the, here I've highlighted this part. The therapist checks. First, we have to ask, are any of her other parts attached to it? Does any part of her want her to keep on carrying his sickness? She checks with other protectors. And then send it out to one of the elements. And final check here, after the unburdening, does she want to show you anything else or want anything from you before we finish? She's good. She wants to play with my dog, Tucker. Did the angry part see her sending the sickness out? Does she need anything from you before we stop? She saw, she sees me, she's relieved. She wants to come and stay with me too. So yeah, she went back to the angry part. So the angry part blended with the exile, and the therapist noticed that and separated the exile, the one that carried the fear, the panic, all that strong emotions, with the angry part. That was brilliant. Okay, and this is a difficult case to read. As I said, there is a trigger warning for this one. But the rest of the book is not like that, in my memory. Yeah.
I found this one quite fast as well. Like she was so panicked and
Yeah.
still so going back in the past, and then just, oh, do you want to unblend? And then so does it happen so quickly? And
it can happen so fast, like lightning. But and you know, here from my memory, it's not the first time they unblended the 4-year-old. She's been working there for a while, because you know, when that happens in the incest, when that happens in the family, in the people that you're supposed to trust, it's not going to be an easy case.
Yeah.
There are a lot of protectors, you know, even now, like the anchor blended with the exile. So she's yeah. So she says here at the back, she explains at the top. So Margot had taken her to a safe place, had taken the 4-year-old to a safe place, but she had discovered through flashbacks that the part was back in the basement again. So the exile, you see, they unblended the exile. Everything was perfect.
And
yeah.
And so then the unburdening, I guess we've discussed this before as well, I guess. Does the unburdening, how often does it happen? Is it, I mean, it seems like often they talk about it happening just once. But, and also, I guess when you ask the client, is she ready to unblend, or is she ready to unburden? Sorry, not unblend. Is she ready to unburden? I also just wonder, how do people know? I can imagine I would say, yes, please, I want to unburden. And then it's not final, right? Because I just want it.
Yeah. Here, so during treatment, Sykes helped bullying manager parts, calm down, drug using firefighters, 5-year-olds. She's done a lot of work with the protectors before she went into the exile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, you can say, yes, go and help my, you know, I've got the exiles, go and help them. But how do you feel about the situation? And you can feel so angry and, oh, so Grace, yeah, I'm interested here. This is a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, so if the question is, are you ready to leave that scene? Are you ready to let go of those burdens? And a part says yes, or the exile says yes, and there's other protectors that are not ready, they'll jump in. And if they don't jump in and you move past them, like if they're bypassed, then the unburdening, maybe a component of it might not be resolved, and then you might have to go back. And the other thing that happens after an unburdening is that, and you know, the thing that you talked about, the integration is really important, that asking the other protectors that were watching, are they okay? Did they see what happened? But I mean, say the session's over, it's really important to check with that exile for at least 21 days. They say like a month. And so there are times when that is not done, that you might have to go back and do another unburdening. Or there's another piece where you say, is there any, she did say it here, is there more? Did we get everything? Is there, you know, more to let go of? Or if that's not complete, then of course, then that will be another opportunity to go back and get more of the story at another time. Does that make sense?
That's super helpful. Yeah, thank you. And so from what I hear about what you said, people do know like all their parts for the most part, except for if the protector is bypassed. But for the most part, the system is quite rigorous in looking out for any part that's not ready to unburden. And so that
yes,
is.
and it happens. Yeah, it happens all along when you're trying to unblend and all these parts keep popping in. That's why they don't trust the system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or they believe something's missing, or, you know, so I've had clients that have parts that we're all ready to go to that unburdening, and then there's like a wall, or there's like, no, we can't leave, there's something more, like there's the system will tell you. But it does happen all along. The system will always let you know which direction to go. And so it's interesting because when you were talking about, you had a part that would, or you liked the idea of empathy being mixed with compassion. And yeah, that's beautiful. But if there's a part that's really stuck on having someone be like crying or really feeling, or very big visceral feelings to be with them, that might be an opportunity to get to know that part. Like that's a part that needs that is really wanting to be like co-regulated or in relation to another in a really strong way. Generally, compassion, the difference between compassion and empathy is that compassion wants to help the suffering, where empathy is really just being with the pain. So compassion is the key, and the parts will know. Like the part that wants more than compassion is another part.
It's really interesting. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely.
And I think just when you say, Grace, about 21 days, it does go, it does depend, I would say. That's an average, isn't it?
Yeah, what they say like a month, but like there's something in science about that a habit can be formed in 21 days, right? Like, so that's why I like use that as a minimum. But they do say a month to check in, right, with that part that's been unburdened. I actually recommend my clients, and I do this myself, check in with my parts no matter who they are, whether they're an exile or protector. Once I got to know them, it's really important to continue to befriend them and to build a relationship and to build trust. And yeah, so one of the ways, and I've showed you guys sometimes with the AI, like I'll even a baby picture of myself or a picture of a client at a certain age that was exiled. I'll say, put that on your phone, like on your screensaver, so you see it every day. Like it's a way to say, all you need to do is check in with a part, like a second. You don't even need to spend 5 minutes with the part, just that they know that you don't forget them. Yeah. It's really important.
Okay.
And there might be more that an unburdened part will share after the unburdening with the person themselves, with the client not being present. So I've had that as well, where people will come back to me, clients will come back to me and say, oh, this past week, I was just crying so much. And so that exile needed more release, emotional release, right? Or that exile was showing them some other things, right? Like, so even though the unburdening's done, the check-in is to make sure that that part knows that you're with them, you're not going to forget them, and that if there's more to the story, you're there to be there for them. They don't have to experience it alone anymore, or the protectors don't have to jump in if those feelings are coming up, that you can be with it, all of it, with self-energy.
Yes.
Leading with self-energy. I don't want to say that self-energy is the only thing, right? We all have parts, right? And we want to just be led with self.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now, like in my experience, because I have worked with simple phobias, and that's easy to solve. You can solve them in one session. And typically, you don't need to go back at all. All the work is done in one session. But that is not a heavy, deep trauma. Yeah, if somebody's scared of a spider because they learned it from their mom, kind of thing. So it does depend. It does depend as well, I would say. And what can go wrong here? She mentions two things: backlash and the relapse. And yeah, the key is to find self, to have a relationship with self. Now, here I've got a question, Grace. When you said about, you have that relationship with your parents and you keep them on your phone and you continue that connection. She says here that she creates updated triangles of the healed system. I wonder, Does anyone have any thoughts of that? Has anyone done it? Or is it just the triangle? You know what I mean? The triangle: self, firefighter, manager.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because I don't do that, but I do update my images of my parts from where they were scared into now being free, like in flying or filled with light or whatever it is or wherever they want to be. I will create a new image. Yes. So I think
Ah,
that's what she's referring to.
okay. So
Right.
you
So
have
I have the
mixed.
pre-unburdening image and then the after
That's
unburdening image.
beautiful. That's amazing. I love it.
And I also originally, I mean, and again, I also want to say that parts will tell you how they want to be. Like when you ask them, how do you, you know, that's one of the things too. You say, how do you want to stay connected? And they'll let you know, like what, maybe it's in the morning, maybe it's at night, maybe it's through drawing, maybe it's through song, maybe it's through music. Parts will let you know. So, I mean, originally I had some of my parts that really like to draw. And so I would go back, like right to the story. I would draw the story of the trauma. And then I would go back and then after the unburdening and draw the unburdening scene. Because it for me, I have a lot of imagery. Not all my clients do. So it's not like again, it's very individual to parts and how they want to be connected, how they want to be paid attention to, even just speaking about them, giving them a voice or talking to people about your parts makes them feel like it's like your child that you're bragging about, you know?
Yeah.
They like it. They know that you're doing it.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. And I love that you do that, the pre-burden unburdening and the post-unburdening picture.
The trauma story, right?
Yeah.
The burden.
Yeah. I mean, like I've seen it in clients as well and myself. A part can change, you know, I get an image of a part and the next thing you know, the part looks different.
I have a great example of that. I had a part that came to me in a vision. It looked like a very old person with like a scrunched up face, really tight. And I'm like, what the heck is this? And I actually found an image to represent it. And then as I worked with it and got to know it, it turned out it was just a baby. It softened and it was just a baby that was so full of energy and pain and crying that it looked right. Doesn't that make sense that like when you're scrunched up and your face is really tight and maybe
Ah,
angry or scared? Yeah, so
yeah.
to me when it first came to me, I had no idea what it was. And then
Wow.
as time got going and I started to explore it, it was revealed. So yes, parts can also change before the unburdening as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is a crucial moment when I noticed most of parts changing shape when they meet self. You know, initially they're like, oh, gosh, they're like monsters. And when the love, compassion is extended to the part softens, it looks like a different, it looks so different. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And yes, Anne?
I had another thought about the empathy, and yeah, I really hear what Gracia said about if you have something that really wants someone else to feel what you're feeling, then that's another kind of needing empathy part. On the other hand, the seeing the parts and having them feel heard and seen, that is also empathy, right? Like that, even in the previous page, a couple pages back, when the girl who was molested said she was feeling the pain, and then the therapist actually had a phrase that said, "I feel it too." It was right before your highlight, but there was a part where the therapist said, I think the therapist said, tell the exile that I feel it too. And it's interesting because it was like having, yes, here,
Yeah.
oh, later. Margot, yeah.
Yes.
Later, after.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Next page.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here, so it says therapist. It says, let her know you feel it too, right before your pink highlight.
Yeah. Yes, yes.
So I just thought it was interesting that there is a sense of, at the very least, the therapist is really encouraging the client to have not just compassion, but empathy, right? It's like, I hear you, your feelings are valid, you know.
Yeah, you know, that's a really important part of the exploring with the part. It's called like it's a cue-induced relation is what it's called. It's about getting that sentence right there. Let her know you feel it too. Like, here, it was like his sickness got into her. I've always felt it in my gut. Let her know you feel it too. What she's prompting the therapist is for Margot to let her exile know that she feels it too, right? Whether it's empathy or compassion, it's about creating a relation. And it's really important that the part knows that you get it, right? Like, that's basically what she's prompting, that Margot lets the exile know that she's really getting it and feeling it.
Yeah.
Yes. And yes, it can be a little confusing to, like, you know, you might think, oh, is the client blended right now? Yeah.
And of course, it's okay to be blended during that process, right? It's just because you want to be blended to feel, right? Like the energy, right? Like, and it's not like you're, I think it's a you know, on a scale, right, of unblending, enough self energy can, they say what, like a critical mass of self, right, is all that it's enough.
Oh,
It's
wow.
okay to and do this work, but having some self energy there is the key. It doesn't have to be the whole of the experience.
Exactly.
A lot of times it's important to be blended, right? To feel the emotion, to be there in with that part, connected in a way that's not being taken over and overwhelmed, but being with, right?
Yes. I am reminded in the book Somatic IFS, there's again like a kind of vignette where the exile is nonverbal, and the therapist guides the client to feel the emotions, the pain from the exile. Allow the exile to share some of its feelings, so you really get what it's going through, what the exile is going through. So you really, really get it. You really understand her. It's been really difficult for her. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a key piece in the witnessing part, yeah, right? To sit with the part, to whether it's visual, what they're sharing, smell, sound, feel, right? Like, to really, it's a critical part, I think, in the witnessing step.
Yeah, and you know, I love here what she makes it clear is in this, I think it's in this story with Margot, she shows the 4-year-old. The 4-year-old is coming to the present moment, and then the 4-year-old is pointing to memories. I want you to see this memory, that memory. Yeah. And then, yeah. Yeah, because to me, it's like, oh, when the exile talks about what happened, is she actually reliving it? And here in this book, it makes it clear that no, exiles do not relive that. We don't encourage that, you know, kind of, but they tell you of their experience. They recount their experience. Ideally, you know, it's
right. That would be the difference with blending and unblending. If the part was totally blended, like in talk therapy, you would be reliving it. But if you're unblended, there's space from the memory and the part, if that makes sense.
Yes,
like there's space as a witness from space. And sometimes you can take the exile out of the scene before you even witness. It's up to the exile if it wants to leave the scene.
yes, leave the scene, tells you more about what happened or not. It's totally up to the exile, what the exile chooses to do. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you, thank you. Yeah. I will complete on this vignette here. There's quite a lot of interesting ideas, concepts in this part of the book. Yes, Marie?
Hi there. I am a learning IFS, so my manager is telling me that I have really nothing to share, so I have to break through that. In my experience with 12-step, and I'll be brief, and we do something where we connect with the self, the true self, which is considered somewhat of a loving parent. And knowing my own exiles and dealing with my own sponsor / therapist, my exile wants to go back and recreate my memories and past because she's trying to make a better family. So my protectors and my managers want to recreate my family of origin over and over and over again to make a better family. And so I'm seeing such a relationship between IFS and 12-step, of course, and I won't go, of course, we're not here to discuss 12-step, though by bringing up these memories and having the self, same word, self, energy, self, whatever you want to personally call self to you, try to reparent that exile. And the exile is usually, for me, in my experience, the inner child or the child, the 4-year-old that Margot, that we're talking about here in the book. She wants to create a better family. She doesn't know how to. She's young. And the teenager who is so angry, holding that fire hose, wants to just abandon everyone and just, I can't do this. And all hell breaks loose. And here it says the exile has gone back to the past. In my experience, because she wants to recreate a new family of origin, a pleasant one. And yeah, so I just wanted to share that because my managers are saying I have nothing more to share. And I want to learn more about IFS, of course, and remain on topic. Though in 12-step, we write it out and we do the non-dominant handwriting to bring writing from the exile through the self. How can I get a better, so-called better family of origin? You can't go back and recreate a new past, basically. And so I hope that helped in any way, but it helped me a lot. And thank you, Vana, and I'll pass.
Oh my God, Marie, thank you so much.
I'm complete. I'm getting the words.
Thank you. Grace.
Yeah, and you know what, that Marie, that is one part of the healing step in the witnessing process, is to not all parts want a do-over, but that's what it's called. They call it a do-over, going back to the scene and being with the part and the way that the part needed someone to be with it when it was in, there back then. And then the second part is to ask the part what it needed to have happen and help make that happen. Or, something similar. So yes, there is a do-over that happens. And it can be not only just self-helping, but other like guides or other parts that have been unburdened can come and help as well.
Right, yeah. I'm working with someone right now and she always sees a schoolyard, but she wants her family to come into the schoolyard and hold hands because she had dance recitals that no one ever showed up to, yada, yada, yada. So it was always the schoolyard and let's hold hands and I want to be noticed right now. So she is constantly trying to resurrect her family to get back to that dance festival when she was 6, but her angry teenager, another protective part, I'm assuming, I hope I'm using the right nomenclature here, to the teenager is lessening her anger because she's seeing the child happy, because the teenager wants to protect. In this instance, the teenager wants to protect the child from never getting hurt again. And so it's so much similar and so different at the same time. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say that if there's and this is good for anybody who has like a storyteller part that keeps telling the same story over again, or a part that wants to keep going back to the same scene, a good question to ask from self-energy is, what part of that hasn't been heard? Or is there a part of the story that somebody you need to hear it hasn't heard? Like there's a piece of the story that part who's telling it, whether it's a teenager or a storyteller part, that there's something that's missing, that they need someone, either a certain person to hear it or a piece of the story that hasn't been revealed yet. When there's repetition like that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm interested whether this is I would assume it's a protector, and this protector that needs to, I want you to go back to there into the past and save that little girl or whatever. Yeah. But this, to me, in my experience, this would be a protector, not an exile. And yes, it kind of maybe, it feels the pain of the exile.
It could be both.
Yeah, it could be both. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's coming with like, I want to tell you the story. Let's go and help her. And it's about getting to know that protector initially. Why doesn't she want to go back? Why does she keep telling the story? Yes, as you said, Grace, that's brilliant. What you said, Grace, about yes. What is behind? Why does she need to repeat it? Is there someone who hasn't heard something? Getting really curious, really. That's the but it is a different way of approaching. There are similarities and there are big differences. Rather than creating a family, let's reparent and create a family. I think IFS is waiting for the exile to say what it needs. I think it's like 12-step makes it in my, I don't really have I've read some of the book, 12-step book, Loving Parent, but it is quite different to the IFS. The IFS is more, I think in my experience, it adapts easily, it flows easier, it's easier. It's an easier approach, in my opinion. Okay, let's go through a few quite other things. It's like the backlash, the relapse, and there's something else. What to do with the exiles between sessions? There's a list of things to do. If we have time to go through that, okay? I will just read the definition of backlash or what happens. Backlash, sometimes a piece of sensitive work will activate protective parts who are very accustomed to running the show. In what we call backlash, they get back in the driver's seat and find ways to distance the client from their recent exposure to wounded parts and memories of bad experiences. So backlash will happen with all clients and with any kind of addictive process. Typically, it involves a familiar set of protective parts taking over. And for example, firefighters might ignite a craving and lure the client in the direction of pills, gambling, or pornography. Managers might then weigh in, berating the client and criticizing everything they do or don't do as wrong. This inner polarity unsettles exiles, igniting their shamefulness and hopelessness. It makes clients worry that they cannot change or that their parts won't let them change. But backlash is part of the process. Our job is to stay calm, reassuring, and optimistic. So it is interesting, I think, here. Okay. That, you know, a backlash happens to everyone. And I'm going to read this a little bit here. Backlash happens when protectors are still scared of returning to the exile story and being overwhelmed by its feelings. It can also occur when an exile feels desperately let down because the client made the promise and did not follow through. So if the client made the promise to return to the exile and they haven't, then protectors might get activated and you get backlash. Okay. Yeah, I'm
Sorry if it's a bit pedantic. When she says backlash will happen with everyone, is it saying that almost all the time it will happen? Or do you think it was a typo and they meant backlash can happen?
well, she does say backlash will happen with all clients and with any kind of addictive process.
Yeah, there's a big difference between will happen and can happen, right? It's a huge difference.
Yeah, it is a big difference.
Backlash is a big thing.
I guess it depends, you know, how
I think that
traumatized.
that's true.
Yeah.
Because the protective parts still need to do their job, right? The backlash is coming from the firefighter who believes that they still need to. Here, I have an example of a firefighter I have a chronic pain in my back, and you know, I'm working with it in a lot of ways, but I went to the doctor. It was fine the day I went to the doctor. And then when I left, like hours later, it was like back again. It was almost like because he said something to me that made it more kind of like, you know, doom and gloom. And it was like almost like I got a backlash from my appointment. Like, I don't know if that really makes sense, but that's how I felt like I was getting a backlash because my pain that I'm getting in my back it's protecting me and I haven't healed whatever is trying to protect yet. So I do think that until we can unburden parts, backlash is, yeah, going to happen. And what's the level of that backlash is another story. Like I wasn't on the ground, like I could walk. So the backlash didn't take me over.
Yeah. So something can trigger and backlash happens. Something can trigger the system, I guess.
Oh, so sorry. So backlash is only before unburdening, before the exile has fully unburdened.
Oh, yeah, here she said, you know, when you know, a client didn't follow through with the promise of keeping in touch with the exile.
I thought it was after after unburdening, the client is still supposed to visit the exile, right? So there's after unburdening and the client doesn't visit the exile after unburdening versus before unburdening and we've discovered the exile and slowly getting to know it. But right, backlash is, I see, that makes more sense why it says backlash will happen if it's just still in the process of getting to know the exile. That makes sense.
Yeah, there's still fear. Protectors are still scared of returning to the exile story. Maybe the unburdening is recent. That's what yeah, you're right. Kind of like it is, if the unburdening happened, you haven't got those kind of 30 days or whatever, you know, what 21 days grace says, you know, for everything to settle in. And it's still getting used to the new reality. So backlash will happen, according to this book. Okay, I will move along to there's a vignette here talking about the backlash, but we'll move through to the trying to get to the end of the book. Oh, here I like this one. I think this is very important. Intervention options for exiles between sessions. And the actions, what do you do? What do you do with your exiles between sessions? And there's a lot of options, choices. If protectors will allow, have the client write a short note to the exile each morning or night. Yeah, Grace?
Yeah, you know what? I think this might be between sessions. I was gonna say this is what this would be for, because unburdenings don't always happen in one session. You can get with an exile and be with it 3 or 4 sessions before you actually get to the unburdening. So again, that's kind of like what I do with other parts too, and suggest clients to do is these things, right? Like keep checking in with them, befriend them, and yeah, I love these examples.
Yeah. And Grace, one more thing is, yeah, we would love to unburden our exiles, but with some people, it takes time to get to the exile. It can take a year. It could take months. Yeah, thumbs up. So it's not even, it sounds so easy. And for some people, it can be that easy. It can happen in one session. But for others, it can take a year. And
I found the final bullet point on that page interesting. It says,
Yeah.
have the client ask the exile not to blend until the client has the support of a friend, a group, or a therapist. So that's interesting that it's kind of, it implies in that statement that the exile can blend, it's like almost like the exile wants to blend, and then the client will say, well, can you wait? We'll give you time to blend. And then, and which suggests maybe what Gracia was also saying earlier, that blending is part of the process to allow it to be heard.
Grace, Grace, I was saying that, okay, let's have a look. Yeah, they need time to unblend.
Is to ask the exile not to blend. So
Yes,
it suggests
you can ask, it's like another person in your system with their own personality, character, emotions, everything. That's what an exile is. So you can speak to it and ask it not to blend if you check in with it. And I have had clients, and I told them, can you check with your protector or with your exile? And sometimes I get that, I'm too scared to do that by myself because I'll get overwhelmed. And sometimes it's not that easy. But you can definitely speak to the exile, and if the exile agrees, he'll know. That's, yeah. I'll read through the rest of the actions, what to do between sessions. Is that okay, guys? Yeah. So, like, I'll start again. Write a short note to the exile each morning or night. Invite the client to find a symbol of the exile, photo, small figure, etc., to keep in their purse, backpack, or pocket. When an exiled memory comes up, prompt the client to visualize exile in a new safe place. That's interesting. Yes, because even early on, we can ask if the exile is in a, you can think of yourself in this traumatic experience. We invite the exile to come to a safe place of its choosing. So yeah, and whenever a traumatic memory comes up, you say, prompt the client to visualize the exile in a new safe place. Let's see what else. Invite the client to send the exile a golden thread. I love that. So send a golden thread from their heart to the exile's heart, or from their heart to the exile's hand. Encourage the client to send the exile a soft, soothing, and calming breath. Have the client ask the exile to share just one important thing until the client has time to return and hear more. Ask the client to reassure the exile that he can stay home when they go to school or work. Yes. And prompt the exile to update prompt the client to update the exile on their current age. Invite the client to show the exile other parts who have unburdened and feel better. So kind of like becoming a hope merchant here. Well, this is an incredible list, in my opinion. Yeah. I can't remember her name. I think the one with the golden thread, the one that has come up with the golden thread, something like Rose. She's the friend of Dick Soros. She came up with it, didn't she? Does anybody remember her name? Something Rose.
You're referring to Michi Rose, but
Yeah,
I
Michi
think
Rose.
she came up with the shamanic unburdening to the elements. I don't know if maybe that too. She may have done that too.
Yeah, she has come. I'm pretty sure she did come up with this one, Michi Rose. Yeah, she brought in all the shamanic elements into the IFS, the 5 elements, and the golden thread is brilliant. Send the exile a golden thread from their heart to the exile's heart. I don't know, Grace or anyone else, has anyone used that golden thread at all? Or is that the first time you hear it, guys?
It all the time.
Yeah,
I like
yeah.
it.
I had, and I'm like, I'm curious, how would you use it?
So it's kind of like going back to that cueing, the cue to induce relation. When, someone has compassion, say, I'll say, how do you experience that compassion? And if they really don't know, say, imagine that's like a golden light that's coming from your heart. And can you send that through that golden light through a thread to your parts? It could be a part, doesn't have to be an exile, but to your parts.
Now that makes more sense to me. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Or you can send that light to, and surround them.
That's a thread. That's like a connecting, like you connect, like
right.
Yeah, a thread that connects you to this exile.
And again, not everything will land well with every part, so it's good to have a whole. This is like a toolbox. It's a really great. I love it.
Great.
For sorry.
Yeah, go. Yeah.
For a self-compassion meditation, I had for a while I was imagining like thick ribbons of love, like connecting, say, my heart to the target of the compassion meditation, and that because compassion meditation was for external compassion, but so yeah, this reminds me of that. And I guess I wonder sometimes maybe a thread feels kind of thin, so a ribbon might feel more thick and bouncy and fuller. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, Anne, that the parts, like you have a part that would love a ribbon, right? Like maybe another part might like a rope. And so it can be, that's the beauty of the creativity of self-energy.
Yeah.
Colleen West, she uses a rope for attachment of her. Doesn't, something like that. Somebody told me, she used a real rope, and something you can do with with your therapist or client and therapist to see what kind of attachment feels safe. And I guess you can do it within your own system to check how much attachment do you want to have with me, asking the part.
Yeah, I think I saw someone at the conference demonstrate what you're talking about, with the rope or a piece of fabric, right? Like to see how much tension, tighten it up or lose, like it gives a visceral feel. Yeah, cool. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Great, thank you. Guys, just the last kind of concept to explore, I'd like to invite you to explore, is recovery and recurrence here. And she doesn't like to call it relapse. In IFS, is known as a recurrence because of the shaming around relapse. Okay, so, and she says here, remind the client that cutting back or being sober could release a surge of painful memories, older and more recent. Okay, and recurrence is similar to backlash and is a normal aspect of the healing process. So that's what happens then with the recurrence and the backlash, okay? The client thinks, oh, I'm doing some progress here. Oh, I think I can cut back on drinking. And then suddenly, other exiles pop up. And we have the relapse or, again, recurrence, not relapse, or the backlash. It says, now that the cycle is back in action, we can name the parts and ask them to slow down. We don't work on improving protective behavior. We work on improving the client's ability to reach out to protectors, understand their motives, and build attachment. Wonderful, isn't it? It's amazing. And that's what you've been saying, like Grace, before, about the role of the self. We don't work on improving protector behavior. We don't work so, hey, you stop drinking. No, we work on building that self to part relationship, safe attachment within the system. Yes, Anne?
Something occurred to me, like, so often, let's say with external relationships, you say like, oh, it's a challenge or a difficulty that can help people show how strong the relationship is in terms of the support they can give each other, or if someone goes through a hard time and someone's there for them, then they're able to, you know, if a person's really supportive, then that strengthens the relationship. So it makes me think here, it's almost like maybe the backlash or the challenging moment is an opportunity for the internal system to show the strength of its relationship. And similarly in meditation, sometimes they say, well, it's the mind, it's not the fact that you can focus the whole time, it's the fact that your mind wanders and you bring it back. And it's learning to bring your mind back, to notice the mind wandering and to bring your mind back from mind wandering. That's the part that like lifts the strength. You know, you're training your limbic friction to be able to notice and bring back. And so here it's, in a way, it's like the friction, the difficulty of the recurrence is an opportunity to strengthen and deepen the relationship of the internal system.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yes. We do need those challenges to, you know, if we didn't have those challenges, why would we want to create this inner harmonic relationship with our parts? So it is an opportunity to strengthen that inner connection.
Yeah, so for example, I guess let's say someone is in a stressful situation and they are triggered to become, you know, and to have addictive behaviors. And then let's say they do some IFS work, and then let's say they go on holiday, they don't have to work, they're away from all their triggers, and they think, oh, I'm totally fine. I never, you know, I'm not using anymore. But then perhaps they really haven't strengthened the relationship because they weren't in the context that will actually trigger
Yes.
them. And so without having the recurrence to actually deepen the relationship to self and practice and to form that inner practice, then they're not actually strengthening their inner system.
Yeah. And it can be challenging. Okay, here I will, there's something I want to tell you. I will read a little bit here because I think it shows what protectors think when they're faced with those challenges. Yeah, I'm going to read this little part. Protective teams can spend years being convinced that a fragile exile is the client and that they are the sole resource for safety. They believe that helping the exile involves moving mountains, that it would take an army, a trainload of equipment, and a magic wand. They wonder how there could be any help from inside this bereft system because they have no sense of the self, no access to their lifeboat. Yet being heard and feeling validated is just the evidence managers and firefighters need that the self exists. If the self can accept and hold them in positive regard, they feel reassured they can do the same for wounded exiles. And why I'm reading this is to show that people really think it's almost impossible to get over their addiction. It's like, oh my God, I'm going on holiday and I started drinking again. It's over. I will never recover. And yet when you create this, when you find that lifeboat self, your inner work, it becomes so easy. It still needs some effort, I think, but it's not moving mountains. But there are protectors that believe that. And a lot of clients, and I've had even myself experience with clients, they will refrain from their inner work because their protectors think, oh, that's hard work. Give me a pill, yeah? Like, for example, nowadays, for losing weight, there's special pills you take and you change your hormones. Everybody's looking for this very, very quick fix rather than doing their inner work. Because the protectors had this impression of this is hard work. I don't know, Anne, do you get a little bit, do you agree a little bit with what I say? Or?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's related to what we were just discussing, the need to strengthen the ability to deal with challenge, right? Because life will always have challenge. There's
the trust self, I guess.
Yes, there's no chance to strengthen self-energy if things are always like easy.
And it takes courage to go there, to go inside and create this kind of harmonious relationship with your parts. It takes courage, and it is it feels amazing. It feels incredible to not be, frightened by your own system.
Yeah.
To trust your own self. And yet it takes courage to get there. And once you get there, it's like, wow, why was I scared before? That's what.
Yeah, very much.
Right. Okay. We've covered quite a few concepts today. It's okay for us to end this book, and we'll move on to another book. Yeah. Today, the 29th of June, 2024, our last book club for IFS therapy for addictions by Cece Sykes, our last discussion. And thank you, and goodbye for now. And thank you all for your participation.